Hello, I am Andrea Fiano, the editor of Global Finance. Since 1992, every year, the magazine has presented a ranking of the safest banks in the world. This has become indispensable for our corporate readers and for banks worldwide. To explain the methodology of these rankings, we have with us Andrew Cunningham, who has been the project coordinator for the safest banks for the last 5 years.
The ranking of the world's safest banks is a ranking of the most highly rated banks in the world, based on long-term foreign currency ratings issued by the three international credit rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. We're presenting 5 rankings. We're presenting a ranking of the safest 50 banks in the world, the safest 50 emerging market banks, which is a subset. We're presenting a ranking of the 50 safest commercial banks in the world, and those are banks which are not majority owned by governments or by state-owned enterprises. We're also presenting a ranking of the safest Islamic banks, and we're presenting a ranking of the safest bank in each country, and we have about 100 countries that we're going to be listing. We use 2 criteria to determine who is eligible for inclusion. And those 2 criteria are that a bank must be rated by at least 2 of the 3 international credit rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. And also they must be among the largest 500 banks in the world, ranked by assets. And in practical terms, that means you have to have assets of about $20 billion to be eligible to be included in our ranking of the world's safest banks. If you are eligible, then we score the bank according to a point system, with 10 points being awarded for a AAA rating, and 9 for a AA+, and so on down. And then we sum the scores that are awarded by the rating agencies. We also do a ranking of the largest banks in each country worldwide, and we have about 100 countries where we're naming the safest bank, and there the criteria are slightly different. In those cases, you only need to be rated by 1 of the 3 major agencies, and also you only need to be among the largest 1,000 banks in the world as opposed to the largest 500. And in practical terms, that means you have to have assets of about $1 billion or more. There are 2 types of banks that we don't include in our rankings. The first type are wholly owned subsidiaries, and that means 100% owned subsidiaries. And we don't include them because we assume that the strength of those banks is already captured by the strength of the parent that we are ranking. The second type of bank that we don't include are multilateral development institutions. So, for example, the European Investment Bank is not included, the African Development Bank is not included. Sovereign ratings are very relevant for the rankings, and they're relevant in 2 ways. Firstly, a high sovereign rating can pull a bank up. A bank that might be of medium strength or even weak strength can receive a high long-term foreign currency rating if the rating agency believes that the government, a highly rated government, will put its financial resources behind the bank if the bank gets into trouble. But a sovereign rating can also work in the opposite direction, and a very good example is Argentina, where you have fairly strong banks, but they're operating in a country with a weak sovereign, which has a history of default, and there the ratings of those banks are pushed down by a very low sovereign rating. If you go back 4 or 5 years, you used to see Italian banks and Spanish banks featuring fairly high up the list of the safest 50 banks in the world. You don't anymore. So other household names from Europe are also featuring much lower down the list than they used to. And consistently, we're seeing that state-supported European banks, most obviously KfW, which consistently tops the list, state-supported European banks are coming very high in the rankings of the world's safest banks. Chinese banks are a phenomenon, both in terms of their increasing size. So we're seeing more of them in the top 500. In fact, we're seeing many more of them in the top 100 when ranked by assets. And slowly we're starting to see more of them in the highly rated group of banks, getting into the top 50 of emerging market banks.